Cancer, high blood pressure, acne, to name but a few. Is it really from milk? Do we even need this glass of milk? Can I drink it? What does it mean for my cappuccino, cheese and co? Milk perks up tired men and makes bones strong. Did you also grow up with this or similar wisdom and sayings while grandma still wanted to force us to drink a glass of milk a day, let's call it that, at all costs? In the past, you were always supposed to drink a glass of milk, but cow's milk has lost a lot of its reputation in recent years. There really has been a lot of discussion. Milk and dairy products are suspected of causing intestinal problems and allergies, for example, but also of being carcinogenic, causing diseases such as high blood pressure and acne, in other words, a whole range of things. Not to mention, of course, the ethical concerns, keyword animal husbandry. Case closed, so everything is clear? It's not quite that simple, at least from a health point of view. What does science actually say and what does nutritional medicine say? It is therefore worth taking a closer look at the positive and negative, let's call them myths, hypotheses surrounding cow's milk. Hello, my name is Dr. Tobias Weigel. With my YouTube channel, I would like to make a contribution to providing medically understandable and correct information about diseases and causes of this illness, but also topics such as sport, exercise, and of course nutrition, because all of these are ultimately very closely related. And if you don't want to miss anything, then subscribe to my channel now. Milk makes you strong and healthy. That's what the milk advertising says. Others, however, warn that people who drink milk become ill and die earlier. So now let's take a look at the facts. We humans have been drinking cow's milk for an estimated 7,500 years, a really long time, or at least a small part of humanity. Did you know, and I found this super interesting when I heard it, that around 3/4 of the world's population, the majority, cannot tolerate milk? In Europe, in Germany, in our neighboring countries, however, the ratio is reversed and milk is one of our staple foods. We drink around 250 milliliters of milk, 50 to 60 grams of cheese every day, as recommended by the German Nutrition Society. But isn't this information, this recommendation from the DGE, perhaps already outdated? Warnings have become more frequent in recent years. Warnings about the health risks of milk and dairy products such as cheese. So should you switch to milk alternatives in future? There are quite a few of them. In particular, towards the end of the video, I go into more detail about the growth factor IGF-1, which has been much discussed recently. What is milk made of? In nature, as we all know, cow's milk is the sole source of nutrition for calves in the first few months of their lives. It is therefore somehow logical that the milk must be very rich in nutrients. In addition to water and the main ingredients, namely protein, fat, and milk sugar, milk also contains many minerals and vitamins, such as calcium phosphate and folic acid. There are around 400 different fatty acids alone, which is super interesting, 400 different fatty acids, and that makes cow's milk quite special compared to many other foods, it has to be said. So there's a lot in a milk like this, and for many people, for many experts, nutritionists and dietitians, milk is therefore a balanced food from a purely health point of view, and above all a practical food, because it provides us with many nutrients. And as I said in the intro, this statement that milk is good used to apply without ifs and buts. But not anymore. Keyword acne, cancer risk, growth factor, IGF-1. Of course, we don't drink milk fresh from the udder, but in a wide variety of processed forms, be it UHT milk, quark, or cheese. Not all nutrients are preserved equally everywhere, of course. And the effects can vary accordingly, the effects on your health, and of course your tolerance. And compatibility is of course an issue that has become increasingly relevant in recent times. Speaking of tolerance, the milk sugar I just mentioned is perhaps better known to you as lactose. That's exactly what lactose is. Lactose is the main cause of milk intolerance, which manifests itself in bloating, diarrhea, and abdominal cramps, for example. And here's the thing. Over 70% of the world's population is affected, so the majority have it. So it is actually almost more unusual to tolerate milk than vice versa. Do we need milk? Yes, that's a good question. Do we even need this glass of milk? That's super interesting when I was preparing for this topic, that we've been drinking cow's milk for 7,500 years, as I said at the beginning. A new study even suggests that a large proportion of Central Europeans did not tolerate cow's milk until much later. And as I said, the majority of people do not tolerate milk at all. The ability to tolerate cow's milk may only have developed in the last 3 to 3,500 years. And I wasn't really aware until now that we humans are the only living beings that also consume breast milk after weaning, and from a different species, namely cows. This is the mother's milk from the cows and not now the mother's milk from our mothers. And we are, so to speak, the only species that does this. Those who tolerate milk can therefore benefit from its healthy nutrients under certain circumstances, which is why children and adolescents in particular are advised to drink milk. And it tastes good too, at least I think so. But do we absolutely need dairy products to be healthy, tall and old? As long as no calves have mingled with my viewers, so to speak, I can confidently answer this question with no, we don't need to. We might like it, but we don't need it. A look at the numerous countries and regions in which milk is not a staple food is sufficient proof of this. And as I said, we Europeans drink a lot of milk, whereas many other countries do not. All the healthy ingredients found in milk can also be found in other foods. Well, cow's milk is not irreplaceable. However, this alone is of course not an argument, for example, for giving up the daily shot of milk in your coffee or your morning muesli. Possible indications of harmful health risks from milk consumption, on the other hand, would be an argument in itself. So what is true? Is milk healthy or unhealthy? That is also the crucial question for this video and has been stirring up controversy for years. Let's take a closer look at the most common pros and cons, the typical myths. I have picked out 5 of them. A small note in advance, I naturally deal with health topics on my channel. So please bear with me if I don't go into the ethical issues surrounding possible animal suffering and the environmental impact of milk production. This is also an issue that we are becoming increasingly aware of, so I won't go into that now. In this respect, everyone should perhaps ask their own conscience. Myth 1, milk increases the risk of cancer. For many people, one of the most common reasons for giving up milk is the fear of developing cancer. The sex and growth hormones that occur naturally in cow's milk, of course, it's breast milk, so to speak, so it also contains a lot of hormones, are said to accelerate the growth of cancer cells. And there does indeed seem to be a connection between cancer and milk consumption, but in both directions, more cancer and less cancer. What does that mean? So far, negative effects have only been scientifically proven in relation to prostate cancer, so it's bad for us men, so to speak. The studies mostly refer to a high daily consumption of more than 1 liter of milk per day. So there seems to be a negative correlation. Contrary to frequent fears, there does not appear to be a strong link between breast cancer and dairy products, according to a large recent review study. So the study situation seems to refute the idea that there is a connection. Did you know that a high milk consumption is even associated with a reduced risk of bowel cancer, so it's good, so to speak? So to say that the consumption of cow's milk leads to cancer is a generalization and is also wrong. Milk may be an influencing factor in certain types of cancer, such as prostate cancer, and a persistently high milk consumption of more than 1 liter. However, other influencing factors such as genetics, general lifestyle, and body weight play a far more important and decisive role. Now let's talk about the growth factor IGF-1, which is supposed to be found in milk because it is often discussed in connection with milk and cancer. So first of all, IGF-1 occurs quite normally in the human body. We all have it. You do, I do, and vegans, for example, also have and need this hormone, which is important. It controls cell growth, for example. The G in IGF stands for growth, cell growth. Especially during childhood and puberty, when we grow, the concentration in the human body automatically increases, so then we have relatively high levels of this IGF-1, logically. Anyone who drinks milk, whether in the growth phase or now as an adult, when I drink it now, absorbs a little more of this growth hormone, of course, because it's in the milk. It's mother's milk in the cow. We estimate that the concentration is around 10% higher in milk drinkers than in people who do not drink milk. This could explain, for example, that milk drinkers do indeed grow longer, taller. So, and now back to cancer. In theory, growth hormone can of course also promote cancer. In practice, in reality, according to experts and scientists, the additional quantities from milk are not sufficient to have a demonstrable, direct, clear effect on cancer. This has not yet been proven. But there are 2 camps here, the pros and cons, so to speak, and nothing has been conclusively proven or disproven. One thing is certain. So far, there is only an indirect statistical correlation, to put it bluntly. What does that mean? We know that milk makes people longer and taller thanks to IGF-1. And more cells and more frequent cell division mean a higher risk of cancer. We know that too, small people versus big people. So far, however, there is a lack of clear evidence. There are no studies that show that people who drink milk versus people who don't drink milk are definitely more likely to have cancer. Myth 2. Milk transmits a new type of pathogen. And something else that is often discussed, but first of all, it will be a bit more special. And I will now go into more detail about research that has caused a lot of unrest. After that, the focus is on topics such as acne and osteoporosis, somewhat lighter topics. But now to this topic. You may have heard that a virologist from Heidelberg, Harald Surhausen, has been researching the risk of cancer from milk and meat consumption for years. There are also other researchers, but his thesis is that meat and dairy products from European cattle contain a pathogen that leads to constant inflammatory reactions, and this constant inflammatory reaction increases the risk of cancer. That is logical so far. This thesis is based on a contradiction that he discovered in data from different countries. The researcher found out that in countries such as India, Japan, and South Korea, in other words in Asia, the colon and breast cancer rates were traditionally very low. However, after more and more meat and dairy products were also consumed there from the middle of the 20th century, the rates rose sharply. And now you might think that there is a connection here. At the same time, however, there are countries such as Mongolia or Bolivia where meat consumption has been high for many years, but the cancer rate has remained very low in contrast to South Korea or Japan. So logically, the question arose, does only the consumption of meat and milk from European cattle, which has been exported to Japan, so to speak, cause health problems? That is the question. In Mongolia and other countries with high meat consumption and low cancer rates, other cattle species such as yak cattle are kept and eaten there, whereas countries such as Japan, South Korea, etc., with higher cancer rates import European cattle, so they eat European cattle. In the meantime, the researchers have made a discovery and found something astonishing in blood samples from European cattle, the cattle here in Germany. They were able to identify a new type of pathogen in all of them, a pathogen that is neither a bacterium nor a virus. It is called the plasmidome. To put it simply, the researchers' theory is that a child becomes infected with the pathogen after weaning through the consumption of milk or meat at the age of up to 1 year, when the immune system is not yet fully developed. That's when it becomes infected. The pathogen, neither a virus nor a bacterium, causes constant inflammatory reactions in the cells, as I said earlier, which accompany people throughout their lives. And this can lead to mutations in the genetic material of the cells and thus to cancer. Over time, this increases the probability that precisely those mutations will occur that turn healthy cells into tumor cells, so cancer develops. That is the theory. The fact is that many more studies are still needed to definitively prove this thesis. It is a thesis. This is why the Heidelberg researcher does not advise against milk and dairy products. He does not say that himself. Myth number 3, dairy consumption leads to acne. Now back to a more everyday problem. Acne is a common condition, especially among young people and adolescents, even in adulthood. There are many different causes, which is very important. Many different causes usually come together. There is no single cause. It is often a combination of predisposition, genetics, as is so often the case, hormonal fluctuations, also as is so often the case, and environmental influences, also as is so often the case with illness. Milk and dairy products in particular are considered to be acne promoting. According to an analysis of a really large number of patients, almost 72,000 patients in 2018, just 1 glass of milk a day can increase the risk of acne by 8%. For more than 1 glass, the figure is as high as 12%. Again, however, it must be said that milk is very probably not the sole trigger. Rather, and this is the important thing, in the study, milk primarily contributed to a worsening of moderate to moderately severe acne. So the acne already exists, and if you drink a lot of milk, it gets worse, so to speak. The development of mild acne due to milk consumption alone has not been systematically proven. So if I don't have an acne problem and then drink milk, I don't actually get acne. Why exactly milk exacerbates acne symptoms has not yet been conclusively clarified. Here too, the hormones contained could be partly to blame, which is why I have just gone into this in such detail. So here I would say, with acne problems, with severe acne problems, you should be more cautious with milk. Myth 4, milk strengthens bones. The high calcium content of cow's milk is probably the most common argument in favor of milk consumption, as people used to say, because calcium is an elementary building block of our skeleton. Milk is therefore often recommended to adults to prevent or improve bone diseases such as osteoporosis. Drink lots of milk to get strong bones, as the saying goes. A few years ago, there was a big outcry because, according to an interesting study that came out of Sweden, milk consumption does not reduce the risk of bone fractures, but increases it by up to 9% per glass of milk. However, this thesis contradicts many other studies and subsequent studies that were then carried out, building on this Swedish study. For this reason, it is currently assumed that moderate milk consumption, and I'm going to say less than 1 liter per day, has neither significantly negative nor positive effects on the adult skeleton. In contrast, the situation is slightly different for growing children and adolescents. Children have an increased need for calcium as they are still growing and need a lot of calcium, and it is assumed that they benefit from the high calcium content in milk. And that's why the German Nutrition Society recommends 300 to 400 milliliters of milk a day for children over the age of 1. Whether for children or adults, always remember that bone formation and bone preservation is, as is so often the case, a complex process. A high calcium intake alone is therefore not automatically a guarantee for strong bones. What else is there? For example, a normal vitamin D level, a normal magnesium level, and of course sufficient exercise are also extremely important. These are also important components for a strong skeleton. Myth 5. Milk damages the cardiovascular system. Whole milk contains around 22 grams of saturated fatty acids per liter. As a reminder, saturated fatty acids are generally associated with an increased cholesterol level and thus with an increased risk to our heart and cardiovascular system and with an increased risk of diabetes. So you probably wouldn't be surprised if I told you that milk causes cholesterol levels to skyrocket. You could assume that now. It is therefore all the more interesting, and this again shows how challenging research and studies actually are, that this does not appear to be the case. In fact, some recent studies even suggest that the consumption of milk and dairy products can have a neutral or even a positive effect on the heart and your cardiovascular system. This refers to the fears and concerns just described. The study situation on milk roughly reflects the following picture. To summarize, many studies show that milk has a positive effect. In many other studies, milk shows a negative effect. In many other studies, milk shows no effect at all. What to do now? Conclusion: there are no clear statements, and so it is difficult to derive simple recommendations from these contradictory data, pros and cons. What does this mean for my diet? So what should I do now? I've already mentioned a few things. Don't drink more than 1 liter a day, perhaps important in adolescence. From a purely health point of view, milk and dairy products are neither a complete no-go nor a superfood when consumed in everyday quantities, so no more than 1 liter per day. Whether you benefit more from the positive effects of milk or can do without it depends, importantly, on your personal diet and the other foods you eat. If your diet is rather low in nutrients and one-sided, then the ingredients in milk can be beneficial for you because there is a lot in it. That's what I said at the beginning. Always make sure you eat a balanced, varied diet. So if you already eat a varied diet, milk probably doesn't have much added value for your health. The fact is, even if you enjoy eating a cup of yogurt or drinking a glass of milk, you are not digging yourself into a grave. The dose makes the poison. Would you, on the other hand, like to do without animal milk for environmental and animal welfare reasons? That is, of course, very laudable and could actually be a very important reason. As I said, I haven't gone into that now. To summarize, this alone will probably not bring you any great health benefits. Just like cow's milk, most common milk alternatives, which do exist, also have their pros and cons. And if you want to find out more about the milk alternatives, please write it directly in the comments, and then I can also make a video about it. Also super interesting, and I actually spend a lot of time on this. For now, I hope you enjoyed the video. You are welcome to give the video a thumbs up. Thank you very much and stay loyal to me.